The air is cold enough to bite, not the gentle nip of winter, but the kind that creeps into your lungs and settles there. Quiet, sharp, merciless. You stand barefoot on cobblestones slick with frost. Your breath forms little clouds, ghosts of warmth in a world that feels like it's turning to stone around you. Around your neck, a rope, not just any rope, a halter, coarse and worn, like the ones used to lead oxen to market. Your husband holds the other end. His hand, calloused and heavy, grips it without ceremony. He smells of ale and old sweat, of cowardice soaked in drink. And when he speaks, his voice cuts across the market square like a blade dulled from overuse. "What am I bid for this fine woman?" Laughter flickers through the crowd. Curiosity turns to calculation. Men step forward. They look at your hands for calluses, your teeth for strength, your face for warmth on cold nights. You are being measured, not as a person, never that, as property. But the most terrifying part isn't the rope. It isn't the men, or even your husband's eyes. It's this. This is legal. No crime has been committed. No law has been broken. This public spectacle, this auction of flesh and breath and broken dreams, is your best chance at escape. 7 shillings, a nod from the crowd, a change of hands, and maybe, just maybe, a new kind of prison, or a softer kind of master. Part 1. The law that made her disappear. Before there was a rope, there was a ring. Before the public shame, there was a private vow. And before she became property, she was a person. She was 17, maybe 16. The church didn't always write things down properly for girls. She had a name, Mary perhaps, Anne, Sarah. She had a mother's hands, a brother's laugh, and the bruises of a life that taught her to move quietly. He came with bread and boots. He said he had a steady wage. He said things would be better once they were married. They always say that. The wedding took place in a chapel with cracked windows and a priest who smelled of tobacco. She wore borrowed lace and shoes 2 sizes too big. She said "I do" with hope clinging to her voice like a second skin. But that skin peeled off fast. Because when she became a wife, she ceased to exist. Not in the way women fade into motherhood or routine. Legally. Totally. She stopped being Mary. She became the wife of John, not a partner, a possession. The law had a name for it, coverture, a word with the elegance of Latin and the cruelty of a locked door. The idea was simple, so simple it took centuries to destroy. A woman upon marriage was no longer her own. She became covered by her husband's legal identity, as though the law threw a sheet over her face and declared, "She's no longer here." Sir William Blackstone, the man whose words built the bones of English law, wrote it clearly, proudly. The very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage, or at least is consolidated and incorporated into that of the husband. To the courts, a married woman was invisible. To the banks, she was illiterate. To the crown, she was nobody. Before marriage, she could rent a room. She could own a cow. She could earn wages and take her boss to court if he cheated her. After marriage, her wages belonged to her husband. Her home belonged to her husband. Even her children, flesh from her body, belonged to him. If he sold the family cow and spent the money on gin, the law said nothing. If he beat her for serving cold stew, the magistrate turned away. He had the right to correct her, as one corrects a disobedient child or a troublesome dog. Even her clothes, the dress on her back, could be claimed as his property. Divorce? That was a fantasy wrapped in velvet and sealed with the wax of privilege. Before 1857, the only path to legal divorce in England was through a private act of Parliament. It cost more than £1,000, a king's ransom for a working man. The equivalent of over $100,000 today. A poor woman couldn't even dream of such a thing. Even after the 1857 Matrimonial Causes Act made civil divorce possible, the cost remained steep, around $40. Still more than a labourer earned in a year. So if a woman wanted out of a marriage, if her husband drank, gambled, beat her, if he starved the children or lay with other women, if he vanished for weeks and came back with fists, she had no legal escape. No lawyer would take her case, no judge would listen. She could beg her husband for freedom. She could flee and be dragged back. She could vanish, leaving children behind like discarded letters. She could pray for an early death, or she could be sold. The idea was monstrous, and yet rational within the twisted logic of the time. If women were property under law, why not transfer them like cattle? And so a ritual was born. Part folklore, part social theatre, part desperate, brutal negotiation. A man would place a halter, yes, a literal rope, around his wife's neck, waist, or arm. He would lead her to market, often to the very same spot where pigs and sheep were sold. And he would announce, "What am I bid for this woman? 26 years old, strong hands, good teeth, fertile, obedient." The crowd would laugh, or not. It depended on the day. Sometimes it was a performance. Sometimes it was raw and real and agonizing. Sometimes she stood there with a blank face, waiting to be bought like bread. Sometimes her lover was already waiting in the crowd, silver in hand, rehearsed smile on his lips. Sometimes it was planned. Sometimes it was rape in slow motion. The halter wasn't just symbolism, it was proof of transaction. It marked her as transferable. And when the coin exchanged hands, when the crowd nodded, when the new man took the rope and the old one stepped away, the deal was done. No court involved, no paperwork, no priest, just public witness, communal approval, and the silent agreement that this counted. For some women, it was liberation. For others, it was merely a new form of captivity. But for all of them, it was the only way out, the only escape route from a system that called them wives, but treated them as livestock. So they endured the stares, the laughter, the whispers. They stood beneath skies thick with coal smoke, on cobblestones slick with animal piss, and prayed that the man who bought them might at least let them breathe, that he might be less cruel, or at least less drunk, that he might see them, not as a thing, not as a trade, but as a woman, even if the law never would. Part 3. The auction itself. The air stinks of animals, mud, and men. The market square, usually loud with the cries of vendors and livestock, has taken on a quieter tone today. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. The kind of quiet that wraps around a woman's throat like another rope. She walks beside her husband, or rather, he leads and she follows, because that is the performance. The halter itches, rough rope on rough skin. It bites into the hollow just above her collarbone. She's worn worse, but never this publicly. People notice. They always do, but today they stop pretending not to. Eyes follow her through the square, some curious, some amused, some disgusted. A few, just a few, are sympathetic. Women glance at her, then away, quickly. They know better than to linger. They've seen the halter before. Men, though, look longer. Some smirk, some whistle. One man nods as if to say, "Good stock." Her husband stumbles a little, already 2 drinks in. He doesn't care. He tightens the rope slightly to steady himself. "Stand up straight," he mutters. "No one buys a wilted woman." She doesn't reply. She hasn't replied to him in days. They arrive at the center of the square, where the stones are smooth from centuries of tread. He turns, raises his hand. The show begins. Right then. "This here's my lawful wife, 28 years old, good with a needle, fair in the kitchen, and fertile as spring soil. Who'll start the bidding?" Laughter ripples through the crowd. It's nervous laughter. People laugh when they don't know what else to do. One man, lean, missing 2 teeth, calls out, "1 shilling," the crowd chuckles. Her husband scoffs. "1? That's what you'd pay for a chicken." "2, comes another voice, bolder. Then a pause. Then another. 3. That voice. She knows that voice. She looks, just a flicker of the eyes. There, at the edge of the crowd, stands Thomas. Not drunk, not smiling, just watching, waiting. She swallows hard. They had spoken, briefly, in secret. This was the plan. Sort of. He'd said he'd come. He'd said he'd bring coin. He'd said he'd try. But now that it's real, now that she's standing with rope around her throat and 100 eyes on her body, something in her shudders. This isn't escape. This is theater. And she is both the actress and the sacrifice. The bidding continues. 3 and 6. 4. 4 and a bottle of gin. The crowd laughs again, louder now. They're enjoying themselves. Her husband puffs his chest, pretending he's still in control. 5. Final offer. That's Thomas again. She dares to look at him now. His jaw is tight. He's not laughing. He sees her. Not as livestock, not as property, as a woman. But the crowd doesn't see that. Another man steps forward, unknown, unsmiling. 6, he says. The air shifts. He's not part of the plan. Thomas stiffens. So does she. This new bidder, he doesn't smile. He doesn't leer. He looks at her the way a butcher eyes a slab of meat, detached. calculating. 6.5, says Thomas. 7, the man counters instantly. 8, Thomas is sweating now. The crowd cheers. This is what they came for, drama, competition. Not for her sake, never for her, but for the thrill. 8 and 6, 9. The numbers blur in her ears. Each one less about her value and more about someone else's pride. She can feel it slipping, the plan, the hope. This wasn't supposed to be a fight. She turns to her husband. His eyes are bloodshot. He's not watching her. He's watching the coins. That's when she knows. He would sell her to the highest bidder, whoever it is. He doesn't care. He never did. That realization lands like a stone in her stomach. And she remembers, again, that she has no voice in this transaction. Unless she takes it. The moment opens, raw, terrifying, trembling, and she steps into it. "Stop," she says. The crowd falls silent. It is the wrong kind of silence, the kind that feels like holding a scream underwater. "I choose Thomas," she says, louder now. "I came here for him, not for this." The other bidder snorts. "You don't get to choose, girl." She turns her face to him, not with rage, but with something colder. Clarity. "No man owns me without my consent, not anymore." Gasps, not because of the words, but because of who is speaking them. The crowd murmurs. The rules are unwritten, but everyone knows the woman doesn't speak. The halter means silence, compliance, transfer. She just broke the ritual. Someone near the back shouts, "Let her speak, she's the one being sold." Another, "This ain't no cattle sale." And just like that, the mood shifts. Not entirely, not safely, but enough. Thomas walks forward, quiet, steady. He pulls out the coins, 7, 8, 9. "Take it," he says to the husband, "and give her the rope." The husband hesitates. The spell is broken. He's no longer center stage. But money is money. He tosses the rope, careless, bitter. "Take her then. Good riddance." Thomas doesn't catch it. He lets it fall. Then, without fanfare, he offers his hand. She doesn't take it yet. She steps over the rope, past her husband, past the crowd. And only then does she reach out. Not as a woman purchased, but as a woman walking away. Part 4. The price of dignity. Years pass. Not quickly, not cleanly. Time in this world does not heal. It only piles itself into corners. Dust on windowsills. Creases in hands. Silence between two people who once shared something like hope. She stays with Thomas. He is kind, mostly. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't drink himself into fists. But kindness is not love, and safety is not freedom. Sometimes, at night, she lies awake and listens to him breathe. Not in fear, but in study, trying to decide whether this man is a cage with softer bars or the beginning of a door she might one day open. She works, she keeps the house, she mends for the neighbors, she learns the price of things. Flour, coal, sugar, and her own hands. They're worth more than she ever knew. Each coin she earns is a whisper that says, "You are not nothing." Sometimes women knock on her door, quietly, shamefully, looking over their shoulders before they speak. Was it true? Was it better? Was it worth it? And she never gives them a simple answer, because it wasn't better. It was just different. Was it worth it? That depends what you think a woman's life is worth. A few years later, she hears of another wife sale gone wrong. A woman forced onto the block, drunk husband screaming prices, crowd laughing like it was theater. She refused to go, refused to bow. The sale was halted, the man fined, the rope cut. People cheer, they say, "That will be the last. No more women in halters. We've changed." But she knows better. Ropes are clever, they adapt. They become paperwork, they become whispers. They become wedding vows with hidden claws. They become the quiet voice that says, "He's not so bad. Where would you go? No one else will want you." The halter is gone, but the ownership lingers, even as laws change. Property rights, divorce access, child custody. Something old and sour still stains the air between a man and the woman he believes he owns. She sees it when she visits the town. New buildings, new dresses, new ways to be controlled. The marketplace where she was sold is now a grocer's. The stones are cleaner, but she still hears the echo. "What am I bid?" Sometimes she wonders if anyone remembers. They don't. History doesn't like ugly stories. It prefers kings and battles, not women with rope burns and defiant eyes. But she remembers. She remembers what it cost to stand still while men inspected her like a beast. She remembers what it meant to say, "I choose him," even when choosing wasn't really freedom. And she remembers the coin, 7 shillings, passed from one hand to another, the price of her dignity. Was it high? Was it low? She no longer asks, because dignity, once taken, is never returned whole. You can rebuild, you can heal, but something always aches where the rope once was. And yet, in the quiet of morning, when Thomas is tending the chickens and the sky is still unsure of its color, she boils water for tea, counts the coins she earned herself, and allows herself the smallest thought. I survived, not because the world let her, not because men gave her room, but because she took what little power she had and used it like flint against stone. Somewhere deep inside her, beneath the bruises and memories, beneath the marriage and the market and the mud, a fire still burns. And that is worth more than 7 shillings and all the silence in the world.